In a fast food restaurant filled with laughter and conversation, an old black man sat alone in the corner, his worn jacket draped over slumped shoulders, eating in silence. Across the room, 3 teenagers smirked, looked at the old man, whispering to each other before one of them pulled out his phone, ready to capture their latest joke. But before they could hit record, a deep voice cut through the noise. "You might want to think about what you're doing." The teenagers turned, unaware that they had just made a mistake that would change them forever. The evening rush at Southern Bites, a well-known fast food restaurant in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, was in full swing. The smell of sizzling patties and crispy fries filled the air, mingling with the sounds of casual chatter, the hum of the soda machines, and the occasional beep of the cash registers. Families occupied booths, parents keeping an eye on their energetic children, while groups of friends leaned in close over their meals, their conversations drowned out by the general din of the restaurant. Couples sat together, sharing quiet moments between bites, and employees moved swiftly behind the counter, trying to keep up with the steady influx of customers. In a dimly lit corner, Raymond Ray Carter, a 65-year-old black man, sat alone at a small table near the window, his back slightly hunched, his large, calloused hands clutching a simple burger. His clothes were worn but clean, an old gray jacket that had seen better days draped over his broad shoulders. The jacket had faint frayed edges, the kind that told the story of years rather than months. His jeans, faded from wear, were neatly pressed, though a little loose on his frame. He wasn't unkempt. His beard was trimmed short, his nails clean, but there was something about his quiet demeanor, the way he sat with a posture both tired and composed, that made him look somewhat out of place in the lively, buzzing restaurant. His food sat untouched for a moment as he stared down at the tray. A large Coke, still full, condensation forming on the outside of the cup, a side of fries that had begun to cool. He picked up the burger slowly, as if savoring the weight of it before taking a bite. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, like a man who had learned to appreciate small things. It was the kind of quiet dignity that few noticed, and fewer still respected. But not everyone was ignoring him. A few tables away, 3 teenage boys sat together, their sneakers brand new, their expensive designer hoodies and caps practically screaming privilege. Jaden Collins, 17, sat at the center, casually leaning back, his AirPods dangling around his neck, his Rolex peeking from beneath his sleeve. Liam Garcia, 16, was next to him, a Latino kid with a sharp sense of humor, always ready to go along with whatever Jaden found amusing. Ethan Brooks, 17, completed the trio, a tall, lanky teen with freckles and a permanent smirk. While they had initially been talking about school, about basketball, about a party that was coming up that weekend, their attention had shifted toward Ray. Jaden was the first to comment, nudging Liam with his elbow before jerking his chin toward the older man. "Yo, check it out. Homeless guy special, 1 burger, no fries." His voice was low but sharp, laced with the arrogance of someone who had never known real struggle. Liam snorted, glancing at Ray before looking back at Jaden. "Come on, man," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Ethan leaned in, smirking. "Nah, he's right. Dude looks like he just finished digging through a dumpster. You think he actually paid for that, or is he just waiting for someone to leave their tray?" They chuckled, their voices hushed enough to avoid attracting attention, but loud enough that anyone listening nearby would hear the mockery laced in their words. Jaden pulled his phone out, tapping the camera app before lifting it slightly, angling the lens toward Ray as if trying to take a candid shot. Liam hesitated. "Bro, don't." Jaden grinned, ignoring him. "Relax. Just a little fun. I'll caption it, Hood Legend spotted in the wild." Ethan laughed under his breath, already unlocking his phone. "Dude, you should make a TikTok. #real-life NPC moment." Jaden swiped through his filters, his thumb hovering over the record button, but before he could press it, an idea seemed to strike him. His lips curled into a smirk, and he glanced between Ethan and Liam, eyes glinting with amusement. "Actually, you know what? Why don't we have a little fun? I mean, come on, it's not like the guy's gonna say anything." Ethan, already caught up in the moment, grinned. "You mean like, go talk to him?" Jaden grinned wider, grabbing a few coins from his pocket quarters, dimes, a crumpled $1 bill, and twirled them between his fingers. Yeah, maybe he could use a little donation. Liam shifted uncomfortably, casting another glance at Ray. The man still hadn't looked up, his focus seemingly on his meal, but there was something about his stillness that made Liam hesitate. Still, he didn't speak up. He never did when Jayden got like this. Jayden stood first, Ethan immediately following. After a brief moment, Liam sighed and got up too. As they crossed the room, their sneakers squeaking lightly against the restaurant's tiled floor. A few people glanced up from their meals, but most didn't pay them much mind. A group of teenagers messing around wasn't unusual. Jayden arrived first, stopping just across from Ray's table. He made a show of flipping the $1 bill onto the table, letting it flutter down next to Ray's tray before clicking his tongue. "Here you go, old man. That should help you out a little." Ethan stifled a laugh, lifting his phone and tilting it slightly to catch the moment. Ray didn't react. Jayden raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "What? No thank you." He gestured toward the money. "Come on, dude, we're just trying to help." Ray remained still, his fingers wrapped loosely around the edge of his tray. The silence between them stretched longer than they expected. Liam shifted awkwardly. Something about this didn't feel right. Jayden, however, wasn't done yet. He pulled a quarter from his pocket and set it down beside the dollar, tapping it twice with his finger. "Here, get yourself some ketchup. On me." Ethan finally broke into laughter, his phone still recording. That was when Ray moved. Slowly, deliberately, he set his burger down, wiped his fingers on a napkin, and finally, lifted his head. His eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto Jayden's. The smirk on the teenager's face faltered. The air around the table grew heavy, as if the restaurant itself had suddenly gone quieter. From across the room, someone set their drink down with a soft thud. The voice that followed was deep, controlled, and laced with quiet authority. "You boys might want to think about what you're doing," the man said. The three teenagers froze. Turning slowly, they saw Marcus Thompson, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, standing just a few feet away. His eyes were sharp, unwavering. And he wasn't smiling. Jayden stiffened, his smirk fading slightly as he turned toward the voice. Marcus Thompson stood there, broad-shouldered, imposing, his arms crossed over his chest. His eyes dark, unwavering, locked onto Jayden's with a quiet intensity that sent a chill crawling up his spine. Ethan lowered his phone just a fraction, his fingers tightening around the device, as if unsure whether to keep recording or to put it away. Liam, already uneasy from the moment they had approached Ray's table, swallowed hard, his gaze darting between Marcus and the older man still seated before them. The air in Southern Bites had shifted. What had moments ago been just another loud, casual evening in a bustling fast food joint was now tense, charged, and suffocatingly still. Conversations at nearby tables hushed. A few people turned to watch, sensing that something was happening but not yet sure if they should get involved. The employees behind the counter exchanged wary glances. Even the hum of the soda machines and the occasional clatter of trays seemed muted beneath the weight of the moment. Jayden, always quick with a comeback, forced out a chuckle, though it sounded thinner than he intended. Excuse me. Who the hell are you?" He tilted his head, trying to reassert the arrogance that had slipped from his voice. "Dude, we were just messing around. No harm, no foul, right?" Marcus didn't blink. Messing around. His voice was low, steady, deliberate, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command attention. That what you call it. He took a slow step forward, his presence alone making Jayden instinctively step back. Ethan, still gripping his phone, cleared his throat. "Look, man, we were just joking. It's not a big deal." His voice was lighter now, no longer dripping with amusement, but rather edged with uncertainty. He lowered his phone further, angling it away from Ray, as if he could somehow erase what had already been captured. Marcus let out a slow breath, his eyes flicking toward the untouched dollar bill and quarter on Ray's tray before returning to the three teenagers. "You think this is funny?" he asked, his voice carrying a quiet, dangerous edge. He shook his head, his gaze settling on Jayden. "What? You think this man sitting here minding his own business is a joke? You think you're better than him because your shoes cost more than his rent?" Jayden flushed, his fingers curling into his palms. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to. Marcus took another step forward, the weight of his presence pressing down on them. You just walked up to a man you know nothing about, threw money at him like he was some street performer, and expected him to laugh along with you. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, cut through Jaden's bravado like a scalpel. You boys ever think about who you're disrespecting before you open your mouths? Silence. Jaden, for once, had nothing to say. Liam shifted uncomfortably, guilt now fully settling into his chest. He had felt it earlier, a nagging hesitation, but he had let Jaden take the lead, let himself be swept up in the moment. Now, standing beneath the scrutiny of both Marcus and Ray, he wanted nothing more than to undo the last 5 minutes. Ethan, no longer filming, rubbed the back of his neck and exhaled sharply. "All right, look," he muttered. "We get it, okay? Maybe we went too far. It wasn't supposed to be that deep." Marcus's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Ray moved. Slowly, he pushed the tray aside, interlocking his fingers before resting them on the table. His knuckles were scarred, rough, the hands of a man who had spent years doing hard, honest work. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, measured, but laced with something deeper, something heavy, something worn. "Let me ask you boys something," he said, his gaze sweeping over them, stopping on Jaden. "How many nights you ever gone to bed hungry?" Jaden blinked, caught off guard. "What?" Ray didn't repeat himself. He simply stared, waiting. Jaden hesitated, then scoffed. "I don't know, man. None?" Ray nodded, slow and deliberate. "I figured as much." He shifted slightly in his seat. "Ever had to choose between keeping the lights on or putting food on the table?" Liam lowered his eyes. Ethan shuffled his feet. Jaden clenched his jaw. Ray exhaled through his nose, his fingers tightening momentarily before relaxing again. "You kids walk in here, full stomachs, clean clothes, phones in your pockets that cost more than my first car, and you look at me like I'm less than you. Like I'm something to laugh at." His voice never rose, never wavered. "But you don't know a damn thing about me." Jaden shifted uncomfortably, his bravado unraveling under the weight of Ray's words. "You think I'm sitting here 'cause I failed at life?" Ray continued, his gaze unwavering. "I fought in Afghanistan. I led men into places you wouldn't last 5 minutes. I carried brothers who never made it home. I came back to a country that didn't know what to do with me. I worked my ass off. And when I couldn't work anymore, I got pushed aside." He let the words settle for a beat, his expression unreadable. "And now I get to sit here and have boys like you throw money at me like I'm some lost cause." Ethan exhaled shakily. Liam couldn't even look up. Jaden, for the first time, looked genuinely uncomfortable. His mind scrambled for something to say, something that would make this moment less suffocating, but no words came. Ray leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. "I don't want your money, kid," he said, voice quiet. "I want you to remember this moment the next time you think about judging someone before you know their story." The weight of those words hung thick in the air. A long silence followed. Then Marcus spoke again, his voice low but firm. "You got a choice here," he said, looking between the 3 boys. "You can walk out of here like nothing happened. Pretend this was just another dumb joke that doesn't mean anything. Or you can own it. Understand that you just got handed a lesson that most people don't get until it's too late." Another pause. Then, slowly, Jaden exhaled. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the crumpled dollar bill and quarter he had placed on Ray's tray earlier. But this time, instead of dropping them dismissively, he folded them back into his palm. He wasn't going to leave them there. Not like that. Liam, after a long moment, cleared his throat. I'm sorry," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, we were idiots." Jaden didn't say anything, but he nodded, just once. Ray studied them for a moment, then gave a slow, measured nod in return. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but maybe, just maybe, a beginning. Marcus looked at the 3 boys, their faces now clouded with guilt, and said, "There's a place downtown, the Veterans Outreach Center. If you want to make this more than just words, go down there and put in some work. Help the people you spent all night laughing at." The words hit harder than Jaden expected. The 3 of them exchanged looks. And for the first time, instead of brushing it off, Jaden nodded. "All right," he said. "Where is it?" Marcus smirked. "Figure it out. You'll learn better that way." They left. No wisecracks, no laughter. Just the heavy silence of three boys who had just realized they weren't as untouchable as they thought. And behind them, as the restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm, Ray picked up his burger again. But this time, there was something different in the way he held it. Jaden, Ethan, Liam walked away from the table, their once confident strides now uncertain, their heads lowered as they made their way back to their booth. The weight of what had just happened pressed against them like a heavy stone, their thoughts racing, replaying Ray's words over and over again. The restaurant, though still filled with the chatter of customers, felt different now. The laughter from other tables didn't carry the same careless ease. The neon lights seemed harsher. The smell of fried food, once inviting, now made Jaden's stomach churn. He slid into his seat, grabbing his soda and taking a long sip. But the cold liquid did nothing to wash away the lump in his throat. Liam sat across from him, staring down at the tray in front of him, pushing a fry around aimlessly. Ethan, who had been so eager to record their mockery just moments ago, now couldn't even bring himself to look at his phone. He had stopped the recording, but the guilt of what he had captured lingered like a bad taste in his mouth. Jaden exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands together before leaning forward. "Well," he muttered, trying to inject some of his usual bravado back into his voice, but it came out flat. That was awkward. Liam shot him a look, his expression unreadable, then glanced over his shoulder at Ray's table. The older man had gone back to his meal, but there was something different in the way he carried himself now. He didn't look broken or pitiful like Jaden had originally thought. No, there was something steady, something unshakable about him. Ethan finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "Dude, that guy's been through some real shit." Jaden scoffed, more out of habit than conviction. "Yeah, no kidding." He tapped his fingers against the table, trying to shake the strange, unsettled feeling twisting inside him. "I mean, come on. How the hell were we supposed to know? It's not like he had a sign that said war hero or some shit." Liam shook his head. "That's the point, Jaden." His voice carried something that hadn't been there before, something firm, something resolute. "We assumed we knew everything about him just because of how he looked. And we were wrong." Jaden opened his mouth to argue, to say something, anything to deflect from the gnawing guilt creeping up his spine. But for once, no words came. He closed his mouth, swallowing hard, before glancing toward the counter where Marcus now stood, arms crossed, his watchful gaze still trained on them. The tension between them was thick, but it wasn't hostility that filled Marcus's expression. It was something else, something more complex. Disappointment, maybe, but also something quieter, something like patience, like he was waiting to see if they'd actually learned anything. Jaden let out another breath, this one more frustrated. "All right," he muttered under his breath, "fine. We were assholes." Liam nodded. "Yeah, we were." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, looking down at his phone again. His thumb hovered over the video he had recorded, the frozen image of Ray sitting at his table staring back at him. He didn't need to hit play to know what it would sound like: the laughter, the mockery, the arrogance in their voices. It made his stomach turn. He hesitated for just a second before deleting it. Not just from his camera roll, but from the recently deleted folder as well. Gone. Jaden noticed but didn't say anything. He just leaned back in his seat, drumming his fingers against the edge of the table. The guilt was still there, sitting heavy in his chest, but there was nothing he could do about it now. At least, that's what he told himself. Then, Liam did something that caught both of them off guard. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a meal voucher, one of those prepaid ones his mom always gave him when she didn't want to give him cash, and set it down on the table. He stared at it for a second, as if debating with himself, then stood up, grabbed the voucher, and walked back toward Ray's table. Jaden's eyes widened slightly. "Dude, what are you doing?" Liam didn't answer. Ethan leaned forward. "Shit, is he actually?" Jaden watched as Liam stopped in front of Ray's table, the older man glancing up at him with a measured expression. Liam hesitated, then slowly placed the meal voucher down on the edge of the tray. "I know it's not much," he said, his voice quieter than before, less certain. "But I just wanted to say I'm sorry, and thank you for everything. Ray studied him for a long moment. The restaurant noise buzzed around them, but in that small space, it was like everything else had faded into the background. Finally, Ray's gaze dropped to the voucher. He considered it for a second, then looked back up at Liam. Without a word, he reached out and gently patted the boy's shoulder. That was it. No lecture. No grand speech. Just that single silent gesture of acknowledgement. Liam gave a small nod, stepping back before turning and heading toward the exit. Ethan followed, and after a beat of hesitation, so did Jaden. As they pushed through the doors and out into the night, the city air hit them like a splash of cold water. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement, and for the first time all night, none of them were talking. Jaden shoved his hands into his pockets, kicking a loose pebble on the sidewalk. We were real idiots tonight, huh? Liam let out a small breath, his hands still tucked into his jacket. Yeah, we were. Ethan glanced over his shoulder through the restaurant window, watching as Ray sat at his table, the voucher still in front of him. He wasn't just another invisible old man anymore. In their eyes, he was something else entirely. Someone they should have respected from the start. For the first time that night, Jaden felt something unfamiliar in his chest, not shame, not guilt, but something else. Something like understanding. A week had passed since that night at Southern Bites, but the weight of it still lingered in Jaden's mind. It lingered in the quiet moments between classes, in the reflection of his own face when he caught himself in the mirror. He hadn't talked much about it. Not to his friends, not to anyone. But the memory of Ray's voice, steady, unshaken, played in his head more often than he cared to admit. It wasn't just guilt. It was something deeper. Liam had been the first to bring it up again. They had been sitting in the school parking lot after practice when he hesitated, then finally muttered, "I looked up that place Marcus mentioned." Jaden, slumped in the passenger seat, barely glanced at him. "What place?" "The Veterans Outreach Center downtown," Liam continued, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel. "The one he said helps vets get back on their feet." "I figured. I don't know, maybe we could do something there." Jaden had scoffed at first. "Do something?" Ethan, sitting in the back seat, leaned forward. "Like volunteer?" Liam shrugged, but there was a certainty in his voice. "I just think, if we're serious about making up for what we did, then maybe this is how." Jaden exhaled through his nose, staring at the dashboard. He didn't want to admit it, but Liam was right. That was how they found themselves, standing outside the Veterans Outreach Center on a cloudy Saturday morning, staring up at the worn brick building with its faded blue awning. Inside, the center was small but full of life. The air smelled like fresh coffee and old paper. The sound of quiet conversation mixed with the occasional laughter of men and women gathered around fold-out tables. Some of them wore old military jackets, some had prosthetic limbs, others sat in wheelchairs, their eyes holding the weight of things most people could never understand. There was a warmth here, a kind of quiet resilience that Jaden hadn't expected. A woman at the front desk, probably in her 40s, looked them over when they walked in. "Can I help you boys?" Liam cleared his throat. Yeah, we were wondering if there's anything we could do to help." The woman arched an eyebrow but didn't question it. She grabbed a clipboard, handing it over. "Sign in. We always need extra hands in the kitchen, or helping with supplies." As Jaden scribbled his name, the sound of a familiar voice made him freeze. "You boys lost?" He turned. Marcus was standing near the coffee station, arms crossed, looking at them with the same sharp gaze he had given them that night. Ethan tensed slightly. No, we wanted to help." Marcus didn't say anything at first. His expression was unreadable. Then, slowly, he gave a small nod. "All right, we'll see if you last the day." The first few hours were spent loading supply boxes, carrying canned goods and dry food into storage rooms, unpacking crates of donated clothing. It was work, real, physical work, and by noon, Jaden could already feel the ache in his shoulders. "You three still breathing?" Marcus asked as he walked past them, an amused smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "Barely," Ethan muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. Jaden rolled his shoulders, exhaling. Didn't think lifting a few boxes would be this much. Marcus let out a quiet chuckle. "That's because you ain't done real work before." Liam, panting slightly, looked around. "How often do you guys get donations like this?" Not enough, Marcus replied. His gaze softened slightly as he glanced toward a group of older men sitting in the common area, playing cards. A lot of these guys don't have anywhere else to go. This place makes sure they don't get forgotten. Ethan followed his gaze, his throat tightening slightly. Forgotten. That was the word that stuck. They kept working, helping where they could, but it wasn't until later in the afternoon, when things had quieted down, that they saw him. Ray. He sat at a table near the back, a cup of coffee in front of him, his fingers wrapped around the mug. He looked the same as he had that night, still wearing that old jacket, still carrying that same quiet strength. Marcus must have noticed the way they stiffened because he exhaled. Go on, he said, nodding toward the table. If you're really here to make things right, that's the man you need to talk to. Jordan hesitated, then squared his shoulders and walked over. Liam and Ethan followed. Ray didn't look up at first, but when he did, his eyes locked onto Jaden's. For a moment, the weight of that gaze made Jordan want to turn around and walk right back out the door. But he didn't. Instead, he sat down. So did Liam and Ethan. Ray studied them for a long time, then finally spoke. Didn't think I'd be seeing you three again. Jordan swallowed. Yeah, us neither. Ray glanced at the volunteer badges clipped to their shirts, then let out a quiet hum. Guess you decided to do more than just say sorry. Liam nodded. We wanted to make up for what we did. Not just to you, but to people like you. Ray was quiet for a moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he rolled up his sleeve. The scars were deep, some old and faded, others still raw. A roadmap of pain and survival etched into his skin. Jordan exhaled, the sight of them hitting him harder than he expected. Ray ran a finger along one of them. IED in Kabul, he said, his voice even. He tapped another. Shrapnel from a mortar attack. Lost 2 good men that night. His gaze lifted to meet theirs. You boys ever hear a grown man scream for his mother while he's bleeding out? Liam looked away. Ethan clenched his jaw. Jaden felt his stomach tighten. Ray didn't say it to scare them. He said it so they would understand. I don't tell you this for pity, he said finally, rolling his sleeve back down. I tell you this because the next time you see someone who looks like me, sitting alone in a restaurant, I want you to remember that you don't know their story. Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Jaden nodded. Not just because he understood, but because he felt it. Liam cleared his throat. He hesitated. Can we do anything else? To help? Ray studied them for a moment. Then, for the first time, he smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. You boys keep showing up, he said. That'll be enough. They did. And from that day forward, respect wasn't just something they learned. It was something they earned. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.